Most people rush through the frozen aisle without paying attention to the small but crucial details that can completely change the quality of the food they are about to buy. One of the biggest mistakes shoppers make is ignoring the frost and ice crystals inside the packaging. At first glance, a little bit of frost might not seem like a big deal. It's frozen food, after all, so why wouldn't there be some ice? But here's the catch. Frost isn't just frozen water. It's often a silent signal that the food inside has gone through cycles of thawing and refreezing. This happens when the temperature of the freezer isn't stable, when products are left out too long during transport, or when stores mishandle inventory before putting it on shelves. Every time frozen food partially thaws and then refreezes, its quality changes drastically. Ice crystals grow larger, piercing the cell walls of fruits, vegetables, and meats, which means when you finally cook them, the texture is mushy, the flavor is dull, the nutrients are not as strong as they once were. Take frozen vegetables as an example. A fresh bag of broccoli should have firm, green florets and a natural look when thawed. But if you notice a cloudy frost coating the bag, you can almost guarantee the broccoli will be watery, limp, tasteless when cooked. The same goes for meat and seafood. A properly frozen chicken breast or piece of fish will hold its natural color and texture when cooked, but once it has been through thaw and refreeze cycles, it becomes dry, stringy, and sometimes even gives off an unpleasant smell. What you're really paying for at that point is water, weight, and disappointment. The issue doesn't stop at ruined texture or flavor. Thawing and refreezing also introduce the possibility of bacterial growth. When frozen food starts to warm above safe temperatures, even slightly, bacteria that were once dormant can wake up and multiply. If the food is refrozen afterward, those bacteria don't magically disappear. They stay trapped until you bring the food home, thaw it again, and possibly consume it. While cooking kills many bacteria, not all toxins are destroyed by heat, and you may still end up exposing yourself to something your body doesn't want to deal with. It's one of those risks that isn't written on the packaging, but it's right there if you know what to look for. Another way frost gives away problems is by showing you whether the packaging has been sitting around too long. Frozen foods are supposed to be sealed tightly, locking in freshness and locking out air. But over time, especially if the package is old or stored improperly, moisture escapes from the food and collects as frost or ice inside the bag or box. That's what we call freezer burn. It doesn't necessarily make the food dangerous, but it destroys flavor and texture. Imagine biting into a piece of steak that tastes bland, leathery, and dried out. That's freezer burn at work, and it all starts with those frost signals on the packaging. Think about the way you shop. When you grab a frozen pizza or bag of berries, you might be in a rush, tossing it straight into your cart without a second thought. But slowing down for just 5 seconds to examine the inside of the packaging can save you from wasting your money. If you see a thin, even layer of frost only on the outside of the bag, that's usually harmless condensation. But if you notice large clumps of ice, frost coating the food itself, or snow, like crystals gathering in corners of the box, that's a red flag you shouldn't ignore. It's not just about looks. It's about what those signs are telling you regarding the food's journey before it reached your hands. Stores don't always rotate products the way they should. Sometimes newer shipments are placed in front, while older ones get pushed to the back and slowly degrade in quality. By the time you buy them, the food has already gone through repeated temperature changes and is coated in frost. That's why you should always reach to the back of the freezer case, where products are usually colder and newer. You're less likely to find frost damage there, and the odds are higher that your food has been handled correctly. This single habit, checking for frost before you buy, can completely change the frozen food experience. It ensures you get what you're paying for, fresh, tasting food that keeps its natural texture and nutrients. Ignoring it, on the other hand, means you're more likely to end up with soggy vegetables, tasteless meats, and freezer-burned dinners that go straight into the trash. It's a mistake so many people make without realizing it. Once you start spotting those icy warning signs, you'll never look at the frozen aisle the same way again. When people shop for frozen foods, they often make the mistake of trusting the bold claims written on the front of the package. Words like all natural, made with real ingredients, or low fat, are plastered across boxes and bags in a way that convinces shoppers they are making a healthy choice. But the truth is hiding in plain sight, on the ingredient list and nutrition label at the back. That's where you see what the product is really made of. More often than not, it tells a very different story from the marketing on the front. Many frozen foods are loaded with preservatives, chemical flavor enhancers, excess sodium, unhealthy oils, and added sugars that you'd never expect to find. Manufacturers know the average customer doesn't stop to flip the package and read carefully. And that's how they get away with disguising processed, artificial meals as healthy options. Take frozen dinners as a classic example. A box might advertise itself as light or fit, with bright green packaging and images of fresh vegetables and lean meats. But when you examine the ingredient list, it often contains dozens of items you'd never use if you cooked the same meal at home. Modified corn starch, hydrogenated oils, artificial coloring, flavor boosters like monosodium glutamate (MSG), and a shocking amount of added sugar show up in meals that are supposed to be savory, not sweet. These aren't included to nourish you. They're there to improve texture, extend shelf life, and make the food addictive enough to keep you coming back. A frozen chicken and rice dinner, for instance, could easily have more salt than an entire bag of potato chips, and you wouldn't realize it unless you checked the fine print. The same trap applies to frozen healthy snacks. Frozen smoothie packs, fruit blends, or even so-called diet desserts are often marketed as guilt-free, but hidden within them are syrups, sweeteners, and stabilizers that transform something that could be nutritious into something almost as bad as a sugary soda. Fruit should be fruit, but many frozen options add sugar to boost sweetness and appeal to consumers who have been trained to expect unnaturally sweet flavors. That extra sugar not only increases calories but also undermines the very reason people reach for fruit in the first place. Instead of fiber-rich, nutrient-dense fuel, you're eating something that spikes blood sugar and leaves you hungry again soon after. Another ingredient trap lies in the sodium content of frozen foods. Salt is one of the cheapest and most effective preservatives, and manufacturers use it liberally to extend the shelf life of their products. But the amount of sodium in frozen foods can be astonishing. A single serving of frozen pasta or soup might contain more than half of your daily recommended intake. And remember the serving size trick. If the box says 2 servings but you eat the entire meal, you've just doubled that sodium intake without realizing it. Over time, consistently eating foods this salty can lead to high blood pressure, bloating, and other health problems. Yet, because the package says balanced meal or under 400 calories, most shoppers don't question it. The ingredient list also reveals how far from real food many frozen items actually are. Instead of whole, recognizable components, often see a parade of fillers, binders, and lab-created substances. It's like textured vegetable protein, mechanically separated meat, and natural flavors. Sound harmless but are vague catch-all terms that can hide all kinds of processing. These aren't foods your grandparents would recognize. They're engineered mixtures designed to mimic taste and save money in production. While they may not be dangerous in small amounts, eating them regularly adds up to a diet built more on chemistry than nutrition. Frozen baked goods and breakfast foods show another common trap. Waffles, pancakes, and pastries in the freezer aisle are marketed as quick and comforting options, sometimes even with whole grain labels. But the ingredient list often exposes refined flours, palm oils, high fructose corn syrup, chemical leaveners that turn what could be a simple food into a sugar and fat bomb. That healthy whole grain waffle may contain more additives than a candy bar, and yet, because it comes from the freezer aisle, many assume it's a better choice. What makes this particularly tricky is the way manufacturers use buzzwords to distract you from the truth. Words like organic, gluten-free, or high protein can lead you to believe you're choosing something wholesome. But unless you scan the ingredient list, you don't know how that food earned the label. Gluten-free frozen pizza, for instance, may swap wheat for rice flour but then add gums, starches, and excess oil to hold it together. A high-protein frozen meal might get that protein boost from soy isolates and additives instead of real, whole ingredients. The marketing is designed to sell a lifestyle, not provide transparency. This is why learning to read frozen food labels is such a powerful habit. The first three ingredients listed usually make up the majority of the food, so if those include sugar, oil, or modified starch, that's a sign the product isn't what it pretends to be. If the list is long, filled with words you can't pronounce, or looks like it belongs in a chemistry lab rather than a kitchen, you're probably not holding a healthy choice in your hands. Real food doesn't need a paragraph of ingredients. A frozen bag of peas should just say peas. A bag of strawberries should just say strawberries. Anything more than that requires you to ask why it's there and whether you really want to eat it. One of the most overlooked tricks in the frozen food aisle is the way companies manipulate serving sizes to make their products look healthier than they really are. Shoppers glance at the nutrition label, see a reasonable number for calories or sodium, and assume they are making a smart choice. But the reality is that these numbers are often based on a serving size so small it doesn't match how people actually eat. A frozen dinner that looks like a single portion will sometimes be labeled as 2 servings, and snacks like frozen pizzas, burritos, or desserts are often split into multiple servings, even though most people consume the whole item in one sitting. This quiet manipulation allows manufacturers to legally advertise lower calorie counts, less fat, reduced sodium on the front of the box while hiding the real totals behind unrealistic serving sizes. Imagine grabbing a frozen macaroni and cheese meal. On the front of the package it proudly says, only 300 calories per serving. That sounds manageable, but when you flip it over, notice the label defines 1 serving as half the box. If you sit down and eat the entire meal, which is what nearly everyone does, just consume 600 calories instead of 300. The same goes for sodium. 1 serving might contain 800 milligrams, but if the box contains 2 servings, eaten 600 milligrams in a single sitting. That's almost an entire day's worth of sodium in what looked like a modest dinner. The illusion of smaller serving sizes tricks shoppers into thinking they're staying within their dietary goals when, in reality, they may be doubling or tripling their intake without realizing it. Frozen pizzas are one of the clearest examples of this tactic. A medium pizza might be labeled as 4 servings, with each serving being 1 small slice. But who stops at 1 slice when they've bought a pizza as a meal? A typical person eats 2 to 3 slices in one sitting, sometimes more, which means the calories, fat, and sodium multiply accordingly. The packaging, however, rarely makes this obvious. The nutrition label is technically accurate because it follows serving size definitions set by regulators, but the way it's presented creates a misleading impression of the food's impact on your diet. Another area where serving size manipulation shows up is in frozen desserts like ice cream, cakes, or pastries. A pint of frozen ice cream might claim a serving is just half a cup, even though most people easily eat a cup or more at once. By listing smaller portions, the company can advertise lower sugar and calorie counts, making the product seem indulgent but not too damaging. The reality is very different when you measure what people actually consume. This pattern encourages overeating because people rely on the optimistic numbers on the box instead of adjusting for the fact that the portion sizes don't reflect real-life eating habits. What makes this even more frustrating is that serving size manipulation isn't illegal or hidden. It's just carefully designed to influence perception. The numbers are printed clearly on the label, but the average shopper doesn't pause to do the math. They trust that the calories, fat, or protein listed represent what they'll consume if they eat the package. Companies know this and exploit it to make their products look healthier than they truly are. It's a psychological trick that shifts responsibility onto the consumer while letting the manufacturer continue marketing their foods with health claims. The only way to guard against this is to train yourself to read labels critically. Always check not just the nutrition values but also the serving size and the number of servings per container. If the box says 2 or 3 servings and you know you're going to eat the whole thing, double or triple the numbers in your head. That gives you the true picture of what you're consuming. Once you start doing this, you'll quickly see how deceptive many frozen meals can be. A small entree that looks light and manageable can turn into a calorie bomb once you factor in the realistic portion. This simple awareness can dramatically change the way you approach frozen foods. Instead of being lulled into a false sense of security by manipulated serving sizes, you'll understand exactly what you're putting into your body. It also helps you compare products more fairly. Two boxes might seem similar at first glance, but once you calculate the real nutritional totals based on how much you'll actually eat, the difference can be staggering. Manufacturers rely on the assumption that shoppers won't take the time to notice, but by catching on to their trick, you make better choices and avoid being misled by numbers that don't reflect reality. Most shoppers don't realize how much information is hidden in the condition of frozen food packaging. When you walk down the aisle, you probably focus on the brand, the price, or maybe the calories listed on the box, but very few people stop to inspect the packaging itself. That small step can save you from wasting money or even putting your health at risk. Damaged packaging is more than just an eyesore. It's often a warning sign that the food inside has been compromised. Small tears in bags, boxes that look crushed, seals that aren't fully intact, or even damp or sticky areas on the package all tell you something about how the product has been stored and handled. Ignoring those signs is one of the easiest ways to end up with freezer, burned, contaminated, or unsafe food in your shopping cart. Think about what happens when a frozen food package has even the smallest tear. Cold air rushes in, moisture escapes. The protective seal that keeps the food safe from outside bacteria is broken. That's how freezer burn starts. Moisture from the food migrates to the coldest spots, forming ice crystals, and over time the texture, taste, and quality are destroyed. Vegetables lose their crunch and turn soggy, meats become dry and leathery, and baked goods lose all their softness. The food might still be technically safe to eat, but it won't taste like it should. What's worse is that if the tear happened during shipping or handling, the food may have been exposed to bacteria or contaminants long before you ever picked it up. Crushed or dented boxes are another overlooked clue. A frozen meal box that looks smashed could have been mishandled multiple times during transport or storage. It might have been dropped, stacked under heavy loads, or shoved around in freezers. Each time that happens, the internal seal is put at risk. Even if the outer box is only slightly deformed, the tray or bag inside may already be punctured. That means the food has been exposed to air, increasing the risk of spoilage. In some cases, when boxes are damaged, they no longer sit properly in the freezer, which can lead to uneven temperature control. That uneven freezing leads to pockets of thawing and refreezing, something that can quietly ruin the food inside without you noticing until you cook it. Moisture on packaging is another silent red flag. If you pick up a box and notice it feels damp or the cardboard looks soggy, it usually means the product has been thawed at some point and then refrozen. This happens when frozen foods are left out during stocking or shipping delays. Once food starts to thaw, ice crystals melt and seep into the packaging. When it's thrown back into the freezer, the dampness freezes again, leaving behind stains or warped cardboard. That damp packaging tells you the product has already gone through temperature abuse, and while it may not make you sick every time, almost guarantees the quality will be poor. Plastic packaging can show its own signs of trouble. If a bag of frozen vegetables looks puffy or inflated, that's a signal of gas buildup inside, which sometimes happens due to bacterial activity. Even if bacteria can't multiply well at freezing temperatures, they can still survive, and if the food was exposed during transport, it could pose a risk once thawed. Any unusual bulging or separation in the seal should be treated as a reason to put the product back. Inspecting packaging isn't just about avoiding disappointment. It's about protecting yourself from potential foodborne illness. Damaged seals mean bacteria or even foreign objects could have slipped in during storage. The frozen aisle is designed to feel safe because the food is preserved, but freezing only halts bacterial growth, it doesn't kill it. If food was exposed to contamination before freezing, the bacteria are simply lying dormant, waiting to become active once the food thaws in your home. This is why health experts stress the importance of avoiding packages that look tampered with, crushed, or torn. It's also important to pay attention to the little details on packages that look fine at first glance. Check the corners of boxes, the seams of bags, and the top seals where they are glued or heat-sealed shut. These are the weak points where damage often begins, and it can be hard to spot unless you take a moment to really look. If you notice frost or ice crystals clinging to the outside of a package, that can also be a clue that the seal has been broken somewhere, allowing moisture to escape. This habit of carefully checking packaging takes only a few extra seconds in the store, but it can make all the difference in the quality of your food. By looking past the marketing and focusing on the condition of the box or bag, you're able to spot signs of mishandling that most people miss. It's one of those small shopping habits that adds up to better meals, fewer wasted dollars, and less risk every time you buy frozen food. Not all frozen foods are created equal, and while many items in the freezer aisle are loaded with preservatives, sodium, and unnecessary additives, there are also options that can be surprisingly healthy if you know how to choose them. The key is to focus on products that are as close to their natural state as possible, with short ingredient lists and no hidden extras. One of the best examples is plain frozen vegetables. A bag of frozen peas, broccoli, or spinach often contains nothing but the vegetable itself, sometimes with a little bit of salt added. These are picked at peak ripeness and flash, frozen to lock in nutrients, which means they can actually retain more vitamins and minerals than fresh vegetables that have been sitting in transport and on store shelves for days. The same is true for fruits. Bags of frozen berries, mango chunks, or pineapple are excellent choices as long as they don't include added sugars or syrups. When the ingredient list says just blueberries or strawberries, you know you're getting something pure and wholesome. Frozen proteins can also be smart buys when chosen carefully. Plain cuts of chicken, fish, or shrimp without breading or sauces are often just as good as fresh, sometimes even better. Fish like salmon and cod are usually frozen soon after being caught, which locks in freshness that might be lost with fresh fish sitting out at the store. The trick is to avoid options that come pre-marinated, breaded, or flavored, because those are usually loaded with sodium, oils, and preservatives. A bag of plain frozen shrimp gives you flexibility to cook it however you like without being stuck with hidden ingredients. Another category worth considering is frozen whole grains. Brown rice, quinoa, barley are sometimes sold in ready-to-steam bags that make preparation fast and convenient. When the ingredient list shows just the grain itself, it's a time-saving option that doesn't compromise nutrition. The problem comes when grains are packaged with sauces, oils, or seasonings that inflate the sodium count. Choosing plain versions allows you to season them yourself at home, keeping full control over the flavor and nutrition. Frozen meals, while often the most processed section, can also have a few gems if you're selective. Some brands focus on minimal ingredients, balanced nutrition, reasonable portion sizes. The key is to avoid meals with endless ingredient lists or ones that rely on creamy sauces, breading, or artificial flavor boosters. Instead, look for meals that feature lean proteins, a good portion of vegetables, and simple grains. If you find a frozen entree where the first ingredients listed are recognizable whole foods rather than fillers, it's a sign that it might be one of the better choices. It's also worth mentioning that frozen foods can play a role in reducing waste and saving money. Fresh produce often spoils quickly if it's not used in time, leading to wasted food and money down the drain. With frozen vegetables and fruits, you can take out exactly what you need and keep the rest safely stored until next time. This makes it easier to maintain a healthy diet without worrying about food going bad in just a few days. For people who live in areas where fresh produce is limited or seasonal, frozen options can provide year-round access to healthy foods that would otherwise be difficult to find. The general rule when choosing frozen foods is simplicity. The fewer ingredients listed, the better. Avoid sauces, glazes, and pre-flavored options and stick to plain, whole foods that you can prepare in your own way. Frozen spinach, a bag of blueberries, plain chicken breasts, or a pack of salmon fillets can all become part of nutritious, satisfying meals when you cook them yourself. When you start reading labels and selecting products this way, you begin to see that the freezer aisle doesn't have to be filled with traps. It can actually be one of the most convenient and reliable sources of healthy foods in the store.